First of all, welcome. This is session number 5. And for those of you who have continued with us, I've seen a lot of familiar names. Welcome back. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're taking advantage of the resources and the presenters that we're bringing to you. These are experts in their field. And that is one of the things that we love to do, is bring you experts, because they can share the latest and greatest information with you. And I just have a couple of things to wrap up before I hand it off and introduce our presenters. So again, everyone, you know, this is a part of OneFuture. We help students graduate prepared for college, career, and life. And we like to put a reminder out because these sessions are primarily for our scholars, but we have opened them up to the community. So if you're not familiar with our resources and services, I encourage you to look us up our website or follow us on social media so that you can get to know what services we provide and how we can continue to support you or others that you might know in the community as well. I have the honor of introducing Laura James today. We used to be part of this wonderful organization called CVEP, the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership. I'll let her speak on that. But I worked with her very closely for many years. We also did a wonderful program on nonprofit leadership. And it's wonderful because both of us continue to do this work. We continue to support each other's efforts. And it's really this type of collaboration that helps nonprofits like OneFuture and I know CVEP continue the work and even help more people. So I just wanted to say you're in wonderful hands, and I'll let Laura give a little bit about her background. Welcome, Laura, and it's all yours.
Thank you, and hi, I'm so excited. I'll get started with my slides here in just a minute, but just so you know a little bit about who I am, besides the wonderful intro that Christina gave for me, I am the Vice President of Innovation at Coachella Valley Economic Partnership. We're a nonprofit organization with a mission to diversify the Coachella Valley economy in order to create wealth for individuals and families. That's kind of why we exist. So it was awesome that we were asked to help with this particular segment of this conference. And by diversifying, what I mean is I'm probably going to say a lot of things today that are not big news to you. You know that we are very reliant locally on a couple of main industry sectors, agriculture and hospitality. And there are only a handful of jobs in both of those industries that pay super, super, super well. So we're looking to add other types of jobs. And part of that is by attracting other types of industry here. We're looking at medical, clean technology, digital technologies, cybersecurity, but also by supporting people as they start their own businesses. And we're largely talking about college-educated people like you all are or are soon to be completed with that mission, who have developed some knowledge or skills and then just need a little help to actually turn that knowledge or that skill into a business. Because we found that it is one thing to know how to do something really well. You know, you can write computer code all day long and be great at it, but turning it into a business where you actually get paid to do it is something else entirely. So that's what we help people do at my organization. And I'm happy at the end of this or during my presentation, if you have questions that kind of relate to that piece of my work as I'm talking about wealth building, just ask and I am just an open book. Again, some of this is not going to be new news. I am not a guru who's going to teach you all of the tips and tricks to make $1 million and retire by the time you're 30. Most, not all, but most people who talk like that are probably trying to sell you something or are trying to get you to do something that is not necessarily a guaranteed or proven way to make money. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about some things that might seem really basic, but I was young too once, and I don't think that there is any way that I could have heard any of this too many times. I wish that I had heard all of it many more times than I actually did. So some of the things that we're going to cover today, or that I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk about a job, a career, and your earning power and what that means for now and into the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about home ownership, liquidity, and how to manage that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Debt, I have what I call kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to debt. Interest, how it works for you and against you. Budgeting and saving and investing. So if you've taken a personal finance class, you've probably heard a lot of this before. If you've taken an econ class, you've probably heard some of this before. But again, I don't really think that you can hear it too many times. It's all completely foundational to building wealth. All of the tips and tricks and everything that you hear about earning and making money, that's all well and good. It's not all about hustle. It's not all about good luck, although hustle and luck are both pretty helpful if you can, if you can manage them. But without these foundational things, you will make decisions that set you back unnecessarily. And once you've done that, any amount of hustle, any amount of luck means that as you're climbing the ladder of success, you're really just climbing out of a hole. You don't want that scenario. You would much rather be climbing the ladder to reach to the top of wherever it is you're trying to go than climbing the ladder and hustling hard to climb out of a hole that you created when you were, in your 20s. And I speak not only as an industry expert, but as someone who did that when they were in their 20s and regretted it for many, many years. Really building the foundation of just making sound decisions is so important to build everything else that you want to do right on top of. Here's the obligatory picture of the dog that will bark if somebody comes and rings my doorbell while I am doing this presentation. So I apologize in advance, but I also put him on this slide because I saw a t-shirt or a mug or something one time that said, "I work really hard so my dog can have a better life." That's pretty much how I feel sometimes. But your job, it's not just what you go and do every day. It's not just where you spend most of your time every day, although it is. We spend, a third of our time working, a third of our time sleeping, and then it feels like a lot less than a third of our life is left after you get all of that other stuff done. You're trading, of course, your time for some reward. Usually with a job, that's some kind of financial reward. And as you progress in a career, we all hope, I'm not there yet, we all hope to get to a point where we can start working a little less because maybe we have investments that we can start to tap into, or things like that. But really, especially in your early career, you want to trade those hours of your day for something that's going to be as lucrative as possible. And in the beginning, it might not really be that lucrative, but kind of always have that next step in mind. If you're in school, then you're already doing that, right? You're doing something that is hard now. It's not paying you anything now, but you know that it's going to pay off later in your life. Hopefully not a whole lot later, hopefully very soon. The same thing I've put on here, volunteer work doesn't pay, but it does pay off. I have found that to be very, very true. The way that I got my job at CVEP, and I actually was asked to write an article about it because the story was kind of so funny, I guess. The way that I got my job was not because I had experience in economic development or in the types of administrative tasks that needed to be done for an economic development organization. It was because I knew how to take meeting minutes. And I only knew how to do that because I volunteered at a little tiny museum up in the high desert and got stuck on their board of directors, even though I didn't want to, because nobody else wanted to take the meeting minutes. That was one of the tasks that they just happened to want to offload to somebody at CVEP. And so when I had that on my resume, that's how I got my job. I never got paid a dime to do any of the volunteer work that I did at that museum, but it certainly did pay off. It started me on the path to a career that I never even expected to be in. Home ownership. You will see a lot of coverage in the news. If you read, things like the Wall Street Journal or other publications that lean towards financial or business or industry news, you'll see a lot of programs coming out about encouraging home ownership, especially among minority populations, traditionally underserved populations. And the reason is because home ownership has long been known to be sort of this path towards generational wealth. So, when my parents pass on someday, I will, I guess theoretically, or maybe my sister will, inherit their home that they bought. If they were living in a rental, which, maybe they will be doing before that time eventually comes, there won't be anything there to inherit and pass down to the next generation. And so this is a way that families sort of cumulatively build wealth over generations. And that's more important to some people than to other people. It might not be important to you, just something to consider. Importantly, especially in the shorter term, is that it's a way to protect yourself. Right now, with sort of all of the craziness that's been brought on by COVID, of course, you've probably seen that home prices in the Coachella Valley are just out of control. They've gone up something like 25 or 30% in the last year, which is huge compared to other parts of the country. I think the average nationwide is less than 10% over the last year. And so the people who are benefiting from that really are people who are homeowners already. People who are renting and maybe hoping to get into a home, they're kind of getting squeezed out right now. I had even thought very briefly about what would happen if I sold my home. Prices have gone way, 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 way up. I could sell my home and maybe pocket a little bit of cash, and then, gosh, would I be protected in case I lost my job, or, who knows what might happen. But the problem is then I jump into a rental. And what does a rental do? That leaves the decision about how much I pay every month in somebody else's hands. I'm no longer protected from the inflation that we're seeing in pretty much all areas of life right now. It's happening in homes, it's happening in cars, it's happening in rent prices. They're going up faster than people's incomes are going up. So homeownership is sort of a way to protect yourself among those external shocks that happen. And COVID has been one, and right now inflation is one that's pretty serious. It's working to drive people out of the housing market, and it's really putting pressures on the rental market. So keep that in mind, that, for all of the aspirational and white picket fence stories that you hear about homeownership, that's not really what it's all about. It can be just about protecting yourself from those external pressures. Of course, also that your equity in your home builds over time. That's another way that a house is a way to build wealth. So I don't have to do anything except maybe fix things as they break. And this home that I'm sitting in is one of the only things that I will ever own that becomes more valuable over time. There are occasions when home prices will go down. We saw it during the Great Recession in 2008, that whole period. And that's largely that happened because it was the housing market that caused that recession. But as you saw during the coronavirus pandemic, this small recession that we've had, that didn't even happen to home prices because of the particular circumstances of it. So your home is your one asset that you really don't have to do anything with except make your payments every month and keep it relatively well maintained, and it will increase in value over time. That doesn't happen with your car. It certainly doesn't happen with your furniture or any of the other things that you put inside of your home. Just your home is what will do that for you. So that's one of the main reasons that many advisors will tell you to get into a home. With all of that said, though, it is still not always the right option for everybody, especially if you are younger and you want to be mobile and you don't necessarily know where you want to live when you, I'm going to put this in quotes, when you grow up. When not owning a home means that you're not tethered quite so tightly to a particular spot. Now, everyone who's on this call, I want you to stay in the Coachella Valley. Let me make that very, very clear. But by being a renter, you have flexibility to maybe take the dream job that pops up in another city. Also, if you think that, you're going to be starting a family or, getting married or changing your family situation in any kind of way, sometimes renting is a way to give yourself that flexibility without being tethered to one particular plot of land for who knows how many years, so that you have the ability to make the decisions that will benefit you in the long run. So for all of those wonderful flowery things I said about homeownership, there are certainly circumstances where it is preferable to be a renter. Liquidity, I put this slide here just because it relates so closely to the equity in your home. We talked about assets and how your home is the only one that ever appreciates. Liquidity is, in layman's terms, it's how easily you can access your assets. So you might have a savings account. You can get into your savings account by swiping your debit card, right? Or your ATM card at the ATM machine. It's very liquid. It's easy to access and get into. Money market accounts are kind of the same way. It's very easy. Your home, while it's an asset, it's much less liquid. So if I run into an emergency, it's much harder for me to go to the car repair shop and say, gosh, I don't have any cash, but I have this great home. Can I get my car repaired? Doesn't really work that way. The reason that I have this slide on here and the little guy with sort of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, this is a decision that really needs to be made based sort of on your personality. But if you can be trusted with assets that are relatively easy to access and you know you won't go spend them, then it's okay to have some fair amount of what you have liquid and accessible. Otherwise, you might look at finding accounts that are harder to make withdrawals from. Stick more in your employer's 401k plan if you're lucky enough to have an employer that offers one, because there are penalties associated with withdrawing from that earlier. So essentially, this comes down to whether you are willing to stick to your sort of personal budget, your financial plan, whether you trust yourself not to go blow money on something that's kind of silly. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I got 2 credit cards within the span of, I don't know, a couple of months. You know, this was a long time ago. I'm almost 48 years old. So I think at the time I might have been making like $7 an hour. And all of a sudden I had $3,000 of credit at my disposal. And I was so excited. And I went and bought shoes and clothes and jeans and who knows, dinners out and any number of stupid things. And none of them do I remember now. I might have had a very temporary rush of adrenaline from doing that. But, then I paid for them for many years after that. That's kind of an example of the lack of discipline that I had at that time. I'm like the opposite now. It's almost ridiculous. Just something to consider as you're deciding, once you do have, once you've been building your assets for a while, something to consider is how liquid you want to allow them to be. And that's sort of based on your personality and how you think you will be responsible with them. Debt, remember I said the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I've sort of color coded them here. Green is good, black is maybe bad, maybe not, and the red ones are the ugly ones. Some debt is actually good. It's not just like, oh, it's okay to have a mortgage or a home equity loan can really work for you. First of all, like I said, your home is one of the only assets you will ever have that actually increases in value. So if you have a mortgage, especially if mortgage rates stay as low as they are right now, and I expect that they will stay relatively low for some time to come. Back when my parents were buying their first home, I think they paid 14 or 15 or 16% interest on a home loan. Think about how huge that is. And now, we're looking at 3 is an okay mortgage rate. It's remarkable. So if you've got a mortgage at 3% interest and your home is appreciating at, 10 or 15 or 20% per year, as we've seen over the past year, that's a good investment. Not only that, but you can deduct all of that mortgage interest that you pay off of your taxes. That's another benefit that you might get from homeownership. And that only sort of kicks in once you hit a certain income level. Otherwise, and this is not tax advice, I'm not giving tax advice. Otherwise, the standard deduction sort of covers that for most families anyway. But once you hit a certain income level, those mortgage interest deductions can be pretty helpful. Home equity loans are the same. You can take out a loan to fix up something in your house, and that interest that you pay on that loan is still deductible from your taxes, as long as I understand it, you actually use it to fix up your home. If you take out a home equity loan and use it to go on a cruise, you can do that, but you cannot deduct the interest that you pay on it if that's the way you choose to use it. So just something to note. So I called student loans and car loans the bad. And I say that sort of with a quote around it because they're not always bad. Sometimes they are necessary. Maybe we could consider them a necessary evil. Student loans, I have them. I advise my children. I have 2 college-age kids. I tell them, avoid them if you can, but sometimes they're just unavoidable. College is one of those things, it's one of those investments that pays off down the road, much like your home, much like volunteering. College is one of those things that pays off. So if it takes a little bit of a loan to get you there, personally, I'm okay with that. Everybody sort of has differing opinions about that. My advice, though, is don't go crazy. I realize that is not earth-shattering advice. When I went to grad school, I picked the most affordable school that I could find that offered the program that I wanted. My husband is a University of Southern California guy. He really, really, really wanted me to also be an alum. I did not want to pay $109,000, I think it was, for an MBA just so that my diploma could be from USC. It didn't make any sense, especially at my age. There's only a certain number of working years left that I'm going to be able to recoup that investment. So I did my MBA online at Auburn University. Their MBA is about $30,000. So think about all of that money that I saved. It's the same degree. And in most industries, people aren't really looking at where you got your degree from. It does matter in a few select industries, but for the most time, especially for something as general as an MBA, and I'm not trying to run Coca-Cola or a Fortune 500 company here, I'm working for a nonprofit. It didn't really matter where it came from as long as it was a quality program. So I chose that path specifically because of the cost savings, and it's already paid for itself, really, just based on promotions that I've gotten, bonuses that I've earned. Whereas if I had gone to a school that cost 3 times as much, it absolutely would not have paid for itself yet. I would still be working to reach that equalization point. Auto loans, I sort of feel the same way about. They're not ideal, but sometimes you have to have a car. We live in a fairly car-dependent place. We do have a wonderful transportation system in Sunline, but sometimes it's not reasonable to spend an hour getting to where you need to go that's really only 15 minutes away. I get that. I've also lived in very rural locations before where a car was absolutely, positively a necessity. Otherwise, I would have been able to only get to town once a week, which doesn't really cut it when you're trying to have a job that's in said town. So car loans sometimes are just a piece of life that you have to deal with. It's not always possible to save up enough money to get a safe, reliable vehicle. I think reliability is really important, especially when you live in the desert and you don't want to break down on a July day when it's 115 degrees out if you can avoid it. However, when you're making that decision like, oh gosh, for just $100 more a month, I could have my dream car. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you have to finance that extra little piece to get your dream car, then you're not ready for your dream car. I would recommend going basic. That way, again, you're not digging yourself out from under something at any point. You've got what you need, and you're going to be working hard and reaching the point where you are going to have your dream car, and that time will come, but it doesn't always have to be now. I sound like your mother, probably, don't I? Or your father, or your parent, or your grandparent. I'm a mom, I can't turn it off, so sorry. Then the ugly debt. I would say, generally speaking, avoid these at all costs. Credit cards, some people use them to add a little bit of flexibility to their monthly cash flows. Some people use them to get the points, they want to earn, I have an Amazon credit card. It has a ridiculously high interest rate on it. I think it's like 27%. So I pay that sucker off every month. There's no reason not to do that. I don't want to pay 25% more for everything that I buy on Amazon. If I wanted to do that, I would buy it somewhere more expensive. However, I get like 5% back on that. So I game it. I've turned it into a game. I use it. I pay it off every month, and then I end up with, $5 or $10 that I can spend in my Amazon account every couple of months. So it works out. That's really the only kind of credit card spending that I like to see people do. Have one in case of an emergency, especially if you don't have an emergency fund built up yet. I'm okay with that too. And I realize that you don't care what I'm okay with. I'm telling you sort of personally what I would use as a standard. Then you've got like store credit cards, like the Macy's and gas stations, things like that. Those are not particularly useful in an emergency. They always have much higher interest rates even than a regular MasterCard or Visa. I would not recommend getting one ever. They're always trying to sign you up for one. You go to Old Navy and what does the cashier ask you? Oh, you can save 10% today if you open a card. Just don't do it. There's no reason to do it. That 10% is probably going to cost you $100 down the line if you use a card like the average person does and don't pay it off every month. So I would just stay away from it. And then the last one really probably goes without saying, but payday loans, they're kind of evil. Don't do it. The next slide shows how much you really pay in payday loan interest. So when they quote you your annual percentage rate, it sounds like some reasonable number, but because it's a very short-term loan that you pay back very quickly in theory, the rate really in California, it comes out to a 460% is the average actual APR on a payday loan. And this is one of those scenarios that really digs a hole for people. The average person takes out the loan about 9 times because you can almost never pay it off in 14 days. You are better off selling some of your possessions, getting money from a family member or a friend. You're better off doing almost anything other than taking a payday loan. It stinks, I get it. When you have a car repair or something like that, this is where an emergency fund, it doesn't have to be huge, a small emergency fund or an emergency credit card that you actually only use for emergencies can come in really handy, but don't play the payday loan game. I predict that they will probably be all but outlawed within the next few years because legislators are finally starting to really understand the damage that they're doing to people's finances. Interest, and this is exactly why the payday loans, the math doesn't work on them. So interest can work either for you or against you. I yanked just a couple of examples here off of the internet, a good example of it working for you. And this is all sort of about the time value of money. Start early. I don't care if you're putting away $1 a month, it's better than $0 a month. This is one more of those things that I wish somebody had told me when I was 18 or 19 or 20 or even 25 or 26. Person A invests $5,000 a year. Okay, many of us might not have $5,000 a year to invest, but that's just the number that I was able to steal from the internet that didn't make me have to redo the math. So bear with me on that. $5,000 a year starting at age 18, and they do it for 40 years. So they stop when they're 58. So they've put in a total of $200,000 of their own money. By the time they're ready to start making withdrawals, they have $1.1 million. The next person invests the same amount of money every year, but they wait 10 years to start. So they've put in $150,000 of their own money over 30 years. When they start being ready to withdraw that money at age 58, they have about half, almost exactly half as much money just because of that 10-year delay in starting. So you are better off putting in more now if you can. It's something you might want to do if you're living in a multi-generational household and you are, of course, you're probably contributing to your household, but if you can take a little bit to contribute to you and your future, put it in some kind of account. And I'll talk to you about what kinds of accounts those might be in just a minute. And then in the same way, compound interest also works against you. This is how credit cards can become so damaging so quickly. These two examples are people with a $2,000 credit card balance. They have the same interest rate of 20%. One person pays the minimum payment, and it takes them 15 years and a total of over $4,000 to pay it off. The next person pays the minimum payment, but tacks on $10 more every month. They pay it off twice as quickly, and they save about $1,200 compared to the first person. But you see, they still paid $3,200 to pay off $2,000 worth of goods or services or whatever it was that they put on their credit card. I see those numbers. It doesn't matter how many times I see them, it's arresting. It makes me stop and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I ever did that I would ever consider, just splurging this once on my credit card. Here's the other obligatory picture of my other dog, who so far has not barked during this presentation. But budgeting, one of the things I always used to think budgeting was kind of scary because I was going to have to stick to it and then I wasn't ever going to be able to do anything fun ever again. I'm not going to be able to go out to eat or whatever. Then it kind of occurred to me, I don't know how old I was, when it finally occurred to me that I'm the one who writes the budget. If I want to write money in there for going out to eat once a month or however often, I can do that. It's my decision. The other nice thing about budgets is it's not like the 10 Commandments, right? They're not written on stone tablets. they're yours to change. And the reason that I put my Labrador on this slide is, we adopted him and it was all great. And then he has all kinds of medical stuff. He has now become like a line item in my monthly budget. I guess I could have made a couple of decisions, either figure out how to work the dog and his medical bills. I ended up just buying insurance, so it's kind of all covered into our budget, or get him a home that could handle that, So, and realizing, of course, budgeting for a dog who has chronic stomach problems is a very first world problem. And I get that, but it's kind of a lighthearted example of being flexible. And, the same things happen to people when suddenly they have an unplanned pregnancy. And now this is a good time that your budget isn't written in stone, right? You're going to have to figure out a way to make it work. There are all kinds of things that happen in life that are unexpected. And even though you have to shift a little bit to take care of them, they're still well within your control. You get to decide how to make it work for you. I guess my point is it doesn't have to be as painful and frightening as some people might make it out to be. I'll whiz through this. The whole reason that you're ever going to be able to save and invest is because you pretty much did everything else that I've been talking about throughout this presentation. All of the stuff about earning and being conscious about how you're trading your time for money or other things of valuable, sticking to a budget or adapting your budget as needed to, and avoiding the ugly kinds of debt. You do those things and make the right kind of decisions in those things, and then you're going to be able to think about really saving and investing. My to-do list, things that I would advise everyone to do and that I advise my own college-age children to do, is to have an emergency fund. This is one area where I do agree with that guy, Dave Ramsey. It should be very liquid. It should be like in a savings account. I don't care if it's earning a return or not. It should be enough to cover your basic needs for about 6 months. Because as we've seen with COVID, you just have no idea what might happen. And, it was absolutely gut-wrenching how many people were unemployed during this time. And during COVID, it was largely women and minority women, especially, who ended up losing their jobs. Whereas during the 2008 recession, it was largely men who lost their jobs because it was very related to the housing industry and construction. Those were the types of jobs that got eliminated. So it can happen really to anyone at any time. So have that emergency fund. It can take a while. It's obviously going to take you more than 6 months to save up 6 months of expenses. That's okay. Just start socking it away. Other types of investment vehicles that you might want to look into, and you can just Google them. There are companies like Vanguard, E-Trade, SoFi, JP Morgan. There's all kinds of different companies. I don't recommend any one over the other, but things like a Roth IRA that you can get into if you earn under a certain amount of money. Look into mutual funds, which again, Vanguard is a really popular one, where it's as easy as opening a checking account. These don't have to be big, complicated relationships with like wealth managers or anything like that. And if you do talk to a financial advisor of any kind, there's a language that they use. There are fee-based advisors and there are fee-only advisors. Fee-only sounds like it would be worse to me. I don't know why, but it does. Fee-based means they can charge you a fee and charge you a commission on any fund that they put you into or any product that they sell you. You don't want to be paying commissions to your financial advisor. Fee-only means that they're going to charge you one flat fee, and that's going to be agreed upon upfront, so there's not going to be any surprises. They're not going to be motivated to get you into some sort of product that they get paid more to sell. That's my 2 cents worth of advice about looking for a financial advisor. That's where my slides end. My email address is right there. That's usually the best way to reach me, better than phone or anything. And I work out of my home most of the time, so I'm not always tied to an office line, but I'm really easy to find on email. So please find me that way. And I'm happy to entertain any questions, both about my work at CVEP or about any of this or about the stupid things I did when I was young.